I've worked on exactly this many sessions using this mastering template. I'm going to throw it out because I'm getting frustrated rebuilding it in every session. In the last 2 years, I've learned so much regarding clipping, limiting, EQ, compression. I've changed the whole way I work for better results. So we're going to go through that, rebuild a new template, and then we're going to road test it. So let's get into it. You, my friend, are going in the bin and we're going to create a new template from scratch. Now, the one thing with my old template, this is labeled 2023, but it was actually done in 2021. I just made a few tweaks. The main problem with this is it always starts the bit depth at 24-bit. And that isn't bad because the internal structure of Pro Tools is running at 64-bit, whatever. But whenever I import files that are 32-bit, if I drag and drop them, it's automatically going to convert that into 24-bit and I don't get the same true peak. So what I end up doing every time I have to set up a session is change the bit depth to 32-bit float manually there so I know what it's storing the files as. So I'm just going to set a new session up, 32-bit float, 48 sample, because that's typically what I work at. That can go up or down. That doesn't matter because I can do that when I set it up. 2024 template. Okay, that's labeled. Do we like it? Yes, let's create it. So we're going to create that in this folder because this is the new mastering template. Let's click save. And we do not want to save the old one. The old one is gone. So to set this one up, we're going to create, we need a read channel. So we're going to call this read. We will rename these later, but this is just for housekeeping. This is capture. I'm going to create 2 of these, 2 capture channels, a compare channel, compare, and then another channel, which is going to be the master fader, which is literally master. So let's click create. Beautiful. Now we need to get some routing sorted here. So what we're going to do is, actually before we do, we're going to get capture and capture 1, put them in a folder, move to new folder, which will be capture, or we're going to call this masters because that's where it's going to capture 2, which is good. Capture 1 is going to be, now we're going to use the AES. No, this is a ITU standard. Oh, actually, I forget the documentation. I'll put the documentation up here, but we're going to use a standard naming convention, AA underscore song title underscore 24. Actually, no, the true peak of this one is going to be -1 dB true peak, that first one, underscore 2448, because that's what it'll be exported as, underscore ADM. That's for the Apple Digital Masters. And actually, I'm going to change that ADM to Apple Digital Masters because recently people have been getting confused ADM with the same file format for Dolby Atmos, because I have delivered Dolby Atmos projects before, and then when they see the ADM stereo, they're like, well, is this for Service Dolby? And it's like, no. So I'm going to be very explicit, label it Apple Digital Masters. And then down here, this one's going to be a 0 decibel true peak, and we can argue about that in the comments, but I always have a high res, that's the full resolution at 0 decibel true peak. Cool. That is in. So we're going to rename read to mix, which is good. The compare is compare. I'm happy with that. And we're just going to set the sends and output. So the bus, this is going to bus output to master, -1 decibel true peak. So I'll explain what we're going to do there. Actually, we'll do it now. Basically, at the end of that mastering chain, it's going to be finished at -0 true peak. So to get a -1 decibel true peak version, I just put the output of this down to -1. It goes into here at -1. And then if I save solo and input only monitor that, I'm going to get a capture of a -1 decibel true peak file when I play it through, which is good. Beautiful. So with this one, what we want to do is the output, we want to set to nothing that's being used. And we're just going to rename this DOA, which is dead on arrival, which is good. So that has an input only monitor. And this output here is going to be out to 1, 2, but we need to get the input from here. So master bus print, input bus, master bus print, monitor only. That's our main setup. And now we're going to go into our inserts. And this is where things are going to get a little bit different. Now, the very first thing, for the meantime, what I'm using is Perception AB. And the reason why I'm using Perception AB, we go pre, that's good, is because it's what I've started using and I like it. And I'm learning a bit more about it every day. So one thing I noticed is you've got the sync button here, which you can use. I'm going to get rid of auto, and then I like nominally matching to 16 LUF. So that's going to sit there. The first thing in the actual chain is going to be TDR infrasonic, not because I use it very often. It's just whenever there's anything in the low end that's no good, especially ahead of a clipper, before a clipper, I want to have that on. The next thing is TDR infrasonic, standard clip. That's my go-to. And I'll just set this up so it's in Soft Clip Pro because that's what I always use. The clip ceiling and the gain out gets adjusted uniquely for every single session. Standard clip. Then I've got two sort of compressors, actually three sort of compressors I like to use, and I don't use them all together. It's usually one or the other. So there's TDR Katalnikov, and I'm going to put that at 20 Hertz. That's my default. And we'll put that in Make It Active. There's Unisum, which I use for EDM stuff. And we'll get that set up with the Thick A preset. Where are we? Thick A. And again, that will be Make in Active. And there's the Michelangelo EQ, which I really like. I'm figuring out that I don't actually have enough slots here to have everything I want on here. So what we're going to do is the Michelangelo one. What do I use probably most? I use probably TDR and the Michelangelo the most. So that'll take over the Unisum. I'll get rid of Unisum as much as I use it. Actually, what I might do is I just might make a bank down here that I can drag that setting in rather than having to go through a plugin menu every time. So Michelangelo's there. That's cool. Then after that is my favorite, the Meta plugin I made, which is here. And what we're going to do is Ultimate Stereo Widener. Perfect. So basically this tool here, I use for adding a bit of flavor to the width. So I've got a mid-side matrix here, and on the side signal, I can either blend, I can change. So this channel here is the side signal overall, how much volume's there. This one is a parallel compressed side signal, and I might start that at -8 here because I usually don't use that at all. This one is a harmonic, so in odd order harmonics to the side signal. So I usually start that around -25. And then this one is like an Aphex Vintage Exciter setup where it's just filtered top end harmonics. And that's usually at -0 when I'm blending it in because it's not very prominent. So what I'm going to do is, again, that goes Make Inactive, and then I can enable that when I want to. That usually comes after Dyne 1. So where's Dyne 1? So I've got a bit here, which, so I use Dyne 1 quite a lot, and the setting I use here is tonalization strong, -20. That's usually my starting point with Dyne 1. Again, you're going to have options. So I'm going to drag Michelangelo down here into the bank, and I can throw it in when I need to. So where's Unisum? So I've got TDR, Dyne 1. No, I put Meta plug in there, wrong one. I'm going to put Michelangelo down here as the bank, Meta plug in there, Dyne 1, everything with the things I need to use. Then usually after, actually no, Meta plugin usually goes here, Dyne 1 goes there. Then after this is my favorite, Sontec 43T. I like having this set. I've got a few particular filters I like to have set up, and 12 like that. And then I turn this off. Aggressive mode is typically the one I preferred most. Even when they had this in beta, I blind tested everything 100 times and I always came back to that aggressive analog model as enjoying it the most. That's in bypass, and I'll explain why. Because what I have after this, and I often use, not often, I do use this often enough for it to be here, more so than Michelangelo and Unisum, is this setting at 108. And typically I don't like using these filters here to EQ. I much prefer using these ones here. And these curves here are representative of those high, mid, and low bands. So this way, if I know there's not enough low end or mid range, I can just switch this on and boost as much as I need or as little as I need for each of those bands. There's no that's currently turned off, so it's not going to affect the signal. That goes out, and then 11. Okay, cool. And there's still actually something major I got to do here with this whole setup, which makes it way easier to work with. But for the meantime, we'll get this rolling. So the first thing I like to always have, I usually switch between the two. Here, so I got stabilizer cut mode Okay. I like the pop cut mode because it's very sensitive to sibilance there. Turn that off. Clarity module. And this is just another way of dealing with sibilance, is having the clarity module up here. The tilt's pretty low, that aggressive. Turn that off because I don't like using them as default. Vintage limiter, analog, start that up there. Turn that off. Maximizer. Where we are maximizer. Balanced usually removes the least low-end information, which is good. Again, that's in there. Turn that off. Perfect. And then the last one, so make that inactive. The last one, maximizer, is, open that up, is just this in true peak. So IRC1 in true peak, that's perfectly fine. I can take that off. That is good. Now with perception AB, it sits there. And then what I want to do is I want to have BX meter. And what I do is I just have the side signal enabled here and leave that in bypass. And I've got insight, which is a very useful tool still, even though I've got perception. Just going to make some settings here. Show peak hold. Typically I'll look at this or I'll look at that all together. So that's in, which is great. The compare channel has to be in playlist mode. These channels actually have to be in playlist mode. That's in safe solo. That's cool. There's something I haven't done there, and I'm not sure if you can pick it up. What I found is when I had my original stereo mastering setup, I had a stereo template and a stem template. And what that meant is whenever I had to do updates to any of them, I had to do them to both. I actually figured out a way where I can have both the stem and stereo template in one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 6 new stereo stems. I'm just going to place them above here. So stem 1, stem. I don't like to name these because I always get differently named files. I usually name them in session. Going to move that to a folder, which is stem out, stems. Perfect. These are all going to go to a track, which is the mix track, which is great. So I can solo these. One moment, let me just group that. Stems. I can solo these and they're going to output into my mix, and I can capture the stems, or if I don't want to work from the stems, I can just make that inactive and actually work from the mix, which is really good. So I can either work from the individual stems, route it through to here and input monitor it, and it flows through that chain and captures down here, or I can make this active and have individual stems here, record enable, all of these, capture an output for the mix, capture an output for the masters, and we're good. So that's how that setup is done. So what we're going to do is we're just going to close the stems. I like to make that inactive. These are good to have grouped, masters, only because when I'm making edits on the timeline, like I'm topping and tailing things, I can do it in there. This looks like a really tidy template. So what we're going to do is we're just going to save this, save as template. Perfect. So now I've got that all set up, we're going to master a track. But before I do, I want to let you know, whether you use Pro Tools, Ableton, or Logic, I'm actually going to set this up for all those 3 doors. You can click a link in the description below and get it if you're a Logic, Ableton, or Pro Tools user, so you can use this same layout with these same plugins in your own session. Sounds cool. Now I actually got to go master a track. This track is Doom. It was recently released by Dugong Jr. So you haven't heard this Dugong track yet, and it sounds beautiful. Okay, so now it's time to master this track by Dugong Jr., Doom, featuring Evangeline, and it is a beautiful tune. Just take a listen to this before we get started. Beautiful. Now, how do I get started? What do I do? The very first thing, every single time we need to know, what is the true peak level? Where's the maximum short-term loudest? What's the longest integrated? So, loudest true peak 0.3. Mate, I'm going to make a habit of showing this on every video because it's just good practice to get into. Longest integrated is 17.6, which means the crest factor is 17.3 if you take it away from the longest integrated. And then you've got the loudest is 15.2. So that's the loudest 3 seconds of this song is at 4 minutes and 29 seconds. So 4 minutes, 29 seconds. Let's get there. I'm just going to highlight that section. Go over to Insight quickly and monitor the true peak, the overall short-term loudness, and then take away 7.3 from those values. Okay, so let's play that. People make fun I use a calculator, but to be honest, so it's 15.1 plus 0.3 minus 7.3, that's 7.5. Go fuck yourself if you make fun of me using a calculator. So that calculation, what does it mean? You're probably confusing a bunch of people. That means for this track to be at negative 10 LUFS overall, okay, you have to gain the whole file up, so that 3 seconds is 7.5 LUFS. That's not going to happen because then you're going to be clipping 7.5 decibels over 0. But it's just a marker for me. So when I'm applying my limiting, when I'm applying processing, I can come back to this section and know a few things. Number one, it's going to drive my compressors and dynamic processors the most. It's probably going to be where the most amount of distortions are introduced. And also, I can monitor what the overall short-term loudness is when I'm getting towards the end and go, well, how much should actually drive up the loudness in this section? Have I overdriven it? If it's over 7.5, I know that I probably pushed it far too far. And if it's less than 7.5, I know, well, maybe there's room, maybe there's not. It's always important to A/B and listen, but it's just a good indicator. It's not necessarily what I work to specifically. It's just an indicator. So now we've got that in. Now we're going to get our clipping set up. Low end in this track, I already know is perfect. How do I know it's perfect? So let's just get Insight up here. Actually, we'll get a few tools to monitor this. Let's first look at Insight. So you can see when it moves into its lowest fundamental down at 30 Hertz, that is the actual fundamental of the bass. And I'm not going to cut that out because that is part of the sound of the song. And that is important. So I'm not going to put a high pass filter on this because if I lose that fundamental, I'm going to lose the tonality of the track. But also we can look at here in Isotope Editor. If we go across and we look down here, we can see there is a little bit of rumble, so to speak, down there, but it's nothing. Like that rumble there is actually pretty loud compared to what I am hearing in my system. And that's because it is at 5 Hertz. And I don't know many systems that deal with 5 Hertz. I don't necessarily need to get rid of it because it's not all that loud, that lowest section there. And if I do introduce a filter to remove that, what's going to happen to the overall waveform and the peaks and the way it like actually constructs itself? It's not worth it. It's not worth putting a high pass filter on there. It's not like if it was a bright yellow like this down there, then I'd be concerned, but it isn't. So I'm not too concerned with that. So we're not going to use Infrasonic's high pass filter. We are going to go to standard clip because we can see there's a few little rogue peaks around here. And I reckon, you know, if we have this at about -3, or it might be a bit lower, we can go -4. I reckon we can hard clip. And if we go to the loudest peak in the whole track, which is on the left channel, just bring that into the middle, bring that into the left channel, even on the very loudest peak, we're clipping no more than about a dozen samples in a sequence there. So that's good to know. And in terms of the soft clipping to the body, so we go 4 decibels for the main one. A few people have asked how I set this up, so I'll try and move a little bit slower on this. -4, okay? So we're going to start. Now, the soft clipper, I reckon we're going to go, so around there, let's just make sure we're not catching any body. Still all peak, not catching any body, that's good. We're going to go Soft Clip Pro, and that's going to go to -5, not -6, because it starts the transfer curve at -6 to -4, okay? That's why it says -5. That's the middle point of the tangential curve. Actually, I think I can swap that. That's the middle point of it. So if we want to get accurate, there we go. That's -5 up and below. That's the middle point, 1 decibel there, which is exactly what I want to do. Level match this with perception AB and have a listen to see if we've actually made a positive difference to this mix. I haven't compromised the audio all that much, but I've bought myself a whole bunch of headroom. Now, I bought myself 4 decibels of headroom. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this down 2 decibels because I always like to leave this at negative 6 dB true peak. Why? Because a lot of the compressors I've set up are just follow that gain stage. It doesn't make it sound better. It's just how I've worked for a long time. Now, in terms of dynamic processing, let's have another listen and we'll try and clue on to what we can, could, or shouldn't do. Mate, this is really good. Dynamically, I don't think I need to do any downward compression. I'm going to use Dyne 1 very subtly. So not negative 20. I'm going to be like negative 28 because what I want to do is I just want to bring out some very subtle detail out of the top end. I do not want to change the contour or tone of especially the kick. If it starts to get too pokey and too defined, I'm going to lose some of that warmth because that kick drum is gorgeous and we're going to be careful, especially when we go into limiting, that we don't compromise that. So let's level match this and have an audition this processor here. See how I said it can get too bitey? It's not compressing enough in the top end. So what we're going to do is we're going to just adjust the thresholds a little bit, just so it's a little bit more gelled up there, because it's a little bit too pokey to my ear. Okay, let's have a listen before and after. That's pretty nice. Let's just loop this here. I think we're in a good pocket with that. So let's leave that in. The overall stereo width I want to do something about because it's the front to back details are really nice. The dynamics are nice. The stereo, the mid of the stereo, like the mid range of the stereo is just a little bit lacking to my taste. Oh man, why is that the case? I'm not going to use this one, that top end one. I'm just going to use this upper mid, not upper mid, this odd order harmonic saturation in the side signal. We'll just exit out of that. So we'll enable that. We'll have a listen to how this sounds before and after. Very happy with that. I'm very happy with that. All right, so next I just want to just get the overall tone set up. So this is in bypass at the moment. We'll get the God particle out and make sure we're monitoring the right section. Yep, we are. And I just want to have a bit of a monitor to see how we're hitting this low, mid, high on the God particle. Beautiful, beautiful. That's in a really cool pocket. I believe this was only a 0.5 dB boost here with the Sontec, but it just pushes it into here. I backed off how hard I was driving it initially. And again, it's just a 0.5 dB boost there. So let's have a listen before and after, perfectly level matched again. Just want to capture some of that. I think the mid-range might be a little bit too forward. Even though it's only 0.5 dB, I pushed it with the Sontec. I think it's nice for a pop song, but for this song that's a little bit more deep, bit more underground, it might be a little bit too hard. Like it might be a bit too forward. Now I'm going to make a judgment call, and this is very important you listen to my thought on this. I can pull that 0.5 dB down and let it be a little bit more mellow. But then when I'm driving overall volume, the low end's going to crunch a little bit, the top end's going to crunch a little bit, and the mid-range is going to come out anyway. So I'm better off just EQing it ahead, making a little bit more forward so I don't have to push as much limiting down the track. I know it's 0.5 dB, but 0.5 dB here on the EQ in the mid-range compared to 0.5 dB extra of limiting to drive loudness, I'd much rather do it in the EQ and not do it on the limiter, because the limiter is going to compromise a whole bunch of other elements. That is why I'm going to go 0.5 dB here with the Sontec in the mid-range. All right? Hope you followed that. That was really important little detail for this. Now, next is Ozone 11. I'm happy with the top end of this track. Like, it's a pretty chill track. The hi-hats are a little bit, like, they're loud, but they're not unpleasant. So we're going to go straight into the vintage limiter, dial in this using the delta mode. And what we're going to listen for as we pull this threshold down is how much low end it starts to pull away. If it starts pulling away low end, we're going to back this threshold back up. All right? Perfect. So my only real concern with the vintage limiter is where it's doing that clicky crackly bit. Those are the bits where the limiter is actually enabling. The rest of it's just a soft curve into that ceiling. So that's good. Let's go maximize, and then we'll level match an AB. We're listening for those crackles. It's not taking out a lot of low end when I'm doing that. Let's bypass this and just see what overall loudness we've got. Bypassing perception AB. I just want to see how overall loud we are now. Let's look at this loudest section. Remember we said 7.5. Maximum short-term 7.6 there. So we've exactly brought this up. Overall, 7.5 decibels in that particular section in overall loudness. This is the real test though, the real test. We're going to put the true peak limiter on, because I know some people are going to be like, oh, if it's not true peak limit, has a sound, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to just prove to you it doesn't. I put this true peak limiter on afterwards. This is something I learned from the team at Isotope. One of the people there goes, use the maximizer, and then use the maximizer at a 0 decibel ceiling just on the true peaks. So basically this just tracks and oversamples anything over 0 and then cuts it off rather than the whole signal, which is good. Now, let's level match this, because I reckon we're going to surprise ourselves. We're going to surprise ourselves a hell of a lot. level matched. I think we've done a really good job to maintain the integrity of the original master. Now, if I turn perception AB off, we're still hitting -8 LUFS as a consistent figure throughout this main chorus. Now, you're probably curious, the original release, how does that sound? Fuck if I know, it's been months since I worked on it, so let's pull it up. So old master is pre, the new master is this one here. I love both the masters. I actually really like the new master. Just starting to use perception AB a bit more, be a little bit more critical about the changes I'm making. Both are really loud. I think hitting -7.5 LUFS is pretty loud for this style of music. It can definitely be louder. In the original one, it was 3 decibels louder, so I'm hitting almost -5 LUFS in that section. Overall, it didn't distort or compromise the sound. It just gave it a different tone in the original master. This new master, very different sort of approach, but this is my template. Now, what do I do when I want to print it out? I basically record and enable them. I go setup, transport. As long as I have the transport, I can hit record and then press play. And it's just going to record it here. And then I can cut the start, cut the end, bounce those files out, and that master is done, which is great. So there's my mastering template setup, all done, tested for you guys. Again, if you're a Logical Ableton user, as well as a Pro Tools user, there'll be links in the description below for you to get them. Now I can start all my sessions using this, and I'm going to be happy as Larry. Until next time, take care.